Hey, third grade, this is your math video for lesson 7.5. Today for this, you are just going to need a whiteboard. You're just going to need a whiteboard. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at fractions on a number line and how you represent them on a number line, as well as equivalent fractions. So fractions on a number line, you may have seen this in second grade, but what it is it's a way for you, just like fraction circles, just like fraction strips that we talked about, it's a way for you to compare fractions and to learn more about them. So it says here that the denominator tells you how many sections you need. Draw lines to divide the line into 5 sections. The numerator tells you where to put the dot. Put the dot after the second section. So this is showing you 2/5 on a number line. So what this is it's showing you 0 to 1. So if I would ask you, name a number between 0 and 1, sometimes you might be like, wait, it just goes 0, then 1. What do you mean name a number in between? Well, that's where fractions come in, because there are numbers in between 0 and 1 as fractions. So in this case, 2/5 is there on the number line. It's 2 spaces over from 0, and it's still 3 away from 1. So this is a way to represent 2/5 that's not a fraction strip and not a fraction circle. So it shows you where it is in regards to 0 and 1. Now, with a number line, this makes it really helpful when you are comparing them and you're also trying to find equivalent fractions. So here's just a few examples of what fractions on a number line looks like. So I'll zoom in a little. So with this, it shows 0 and 1 all the way down, but then it breaks it up. So this is what it would look like where 1/2 would be. It's halfway between 0 and 1. So this one here would actually be 0 over 2. This would be 1 over 2, and then this would be 2 over 2, even though there's a 1 there, because remember, 2 2's or 2 halves equal 1 whole. Same thing down here. You have 0 and 1, but then you have 1/3 and 2/3. But not pictured, this would be 0/3, because if you have 0/3, you have 0, then 1/3, 2/3, and then what would the 1 be? It would be 3/3, because 3/3 is 1 whole. Same thing down here. It's broken up into 4ths, 5ths, and 6ths. But with this one, remember, 0 is also included in the fraction. So this one down here would be 0 over 6. This one here would be 6 over 6. So that's one of the things not pictured on this number line. So what we are going to do and what you're going to practice on your whiteboards is creating your own number lines and filling in the numbers. Now, when you see it right here, 0 over 4 and then blank over 4 and all these spaces in between, you might get a little confused or overwhelmed. Well, that's where fraction strips come in, because when we were practicing with fraction strips, this will help you place your numbers on a number line. So if I had none of these filled in, that would be 0/4, or that would be here. If I had one of them filled in, that would be what? If I had one filled in, it would be 1/4. What about if I had 2 of them filled in? That would be 2/4. If I had 3 of them filled in, that would be 3/4. And then what would 1 whole be? It would be 4/4, or 1. So this one could be listed as 0, this one could be listed as 1, but these are the fractions in between 0 and 1. But see, excuse me, see how this helps you with your fraction strips, because they just break it apart in a different way. So if I told you to mark 3/4 on your number line, you would put your triangle here. So that's what we're going to practice on the next slide, okay? So on this one, it says, write the fraction that represents the distance the triangle moved. So with this one, I thought I could make this smaller. Maybe not. I'll just move it down. So for this one, look here. Here's where our triangle is. So this is 0 over 2, and this is 2 over 2. So this would be like saying 0 and 1. So what would be our box here? If this is 0 over 2 and 2 over 2, your denominator would stay the same. So it would be over 2 Your denominator is 2, but then what would your numerator be? What would the number on the top be? If I have 0 and I have 2, it would be 1. This would be 1/2 because it's broken down. Think of the fraction strips. So if you go down here, here are your halves. This would over here would be 0/2. This would be 2/2. And then what's the 1 in the middle? It would be 1/2. Okay. Now on your whiteboard, I want you to write what you think this number is. So our denominator is 8. So if we go back to our definition of a number line, the denominator tells you how many sections you need to draw. The numerator tells you where to put the dot. Now in this case, we're trying to figure out both. So if I have 0/8, 4/8, and 8/8, what would this one be? Think about what the denominator is and think of how many spaces you have. If this is 4/8, we're going back one, so it would be 3/8. And then if I would look here, this would be 2/8, this would be 1/8, and then this one would be 0/8. So again, think of it like that fraction strip. Here are eighths down here. Each of these like bold lines here is like a line on the number line, or a line on the number line there, like one of these coming down. Okay. Now let's jump down here to thirds. So we have 0/3 and 3/3. What are our two missing numbers? So look at your fraction strip. Think of the lines. This is 0/3. This is 3/3. What's in between? What is in between? So write that on your number or on your whiteboard. So if we just jumped one space over, we would have 1/3. And then if we have one more space, we would have 2/3. And then our last one would be 3/3. But see how each time the space is different. So see how big it is for 1/2, but then how small it is for the eighths. It's because, same with the fraction strips, the larger your denominator, the smaller the spaces that's on the number line. So now we're going from thirds to a little bit of a smaller space for fourths. So what would be our one all the way at the beginning if nothing is filled in? Look at your other examples here. It would be 0/4 because nothing is filled in yet. But then if we jump to the next one and only one is filled in, we would be at 1/4. And then we have 2/4, 3/4, and then what is equivalent to 1 whole would be 4/4, would be equivalent to 1 whole. So 4/4, 8/8, 2/2, and 3/3 would all be equivalent to saying 1 whole. The whole is the number line 0 to 1, and then we're filling in the spaces in between. Now, the last part of the lesson is talking about identifying equivalent fractions, because on number strips or fraction strips and number lines, that's one of the ways that you can identify equivalent fractions. Because just because the numerators and denominators look different, it still could mean that a fraction is equivalent. So one of the ways that I saw online that a teacher did was they drew a line like this, cutting it in half. And the ones that were touching the line, like you were, splitting not down the middle, but, splitting right on the line. So like 1/4 right there, the 1/6, the 1/8, the 1/2, those are all equivalent fractions. So you could say that 1/2 is equivalent to 2/4 or 3/6 or 4/8. Now, when I move this red line away, it was going down here. So see this line here, this line, and this line. Now, we couldn't say that the 1/5 or the 1/3 were equivalent because it wasn't on one of the bold lines on the fraction strips. So if I drag that back over, see how it cuts through the middle of 1/3 and cuts through the middle of the 1/5. So that would not be equivalent. Okay, it's the ones that if you would like fold it on this line. So like I said, 1/2 is equivalent to 2/4, which is equivalent to 3/6, which is equivalent to 4/8. So that's how you can kind of compare them on fraction strips. So they have the same distance from 0 to, in this case, 1/2 or 2/4 or 3/6 or 4/8. They have the same distance. The same strips are filled in. The same part of the fraction circle is filled in. Everything we've used with fractions. They have the same distance. So we can say that they are equivalent fractions. So if we would represent those fractions on number lines, again, they would have the same distance. So down here, we said that 4/8 was equivalent to 2/4. So if you look here, 4/8 and 2/4 line up on the number line. They have the same distance from 0 to 4/8 as 0 to 2/4, or 0 to 1/2. Okay, so those three examples here, 1/2, 4/8, and 2/4 would all be equivalent fractions. So this was, again, just an introduction into fractions on a number line. We are going to have more practice with this because sometimes it can be very intimidating when you have that blank number line and 0 and 1 are the only numbers on it, and you have to fill it in. So this was just your introduction. You'll do more problems with your teacher, and then you'll also have another video lesson with me looking at fractions on a number line. Good job, guys.